Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. We'll start from Somalia, where at least 76 people have been killed after a car bomb detonated at a busy checkpoint in Mogadishu. Health officials said 70 others were wounded and the death toll will rise. Police said the blast targeted a tax collection center during the rush hours in the capital. Mogadishu Mayor Umar Mohammed said 2 Turkish nationals and many university students were among those killed. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. Moving on to Afghanistan, where 10 soldiers have been killed after the Taliban attacked a military post in southern province of Helmand. In a statement, the military said 4 others were wounded in the attack as 16 troops were stationed at the outpost. Taliban have claimed responsibility, saying they killed 26 soldiers. Spokesperson Zabiullah said sizable amount of weapons were seized by the fighters. In India, opposition Congress party has held protests against the controversial citizenship law in Mumbai on its foundation day. Earlier, former party president Rahul Gandhi said the law is like demonetization and the whole nation will face great loss with it. Thousands of Congress agitators took to the streets of the financial hub against the law discriminatory to Muslim minorities. Islamic organization Tawheed Jamaat is also holding the demonstration against the law in Tamil Nadu state. Meanwhile, Indian government has registered a case against 10,000 students of Aligarh Muslim University for protesting. 27 people have died across India during protests against this new act. Meanwhile, a police officer from Indian state Uttar Pradesh has been filmed telling Muslims to go to Pakistan for protesting against the citizenship law. In a video, the superintendent of police can be seen making extremely communal and threatening remarks to Muslims. The officer called on the Muslim community to leave the country if they want to praise the neighboring nation. Meanwhile, Indian mobile operators are losing over $350,000 every hour over services suspension. Cellular Operators Association has said that mobile internet was ordered shut in at least 18 districts in Uttar Pradesh yesterday. The Indian government has repeatedly shut down communication services in cities including Delhi, Lucknow, Agra in the last 3 weeks to curb these protests. In a related development, Pakistan's iconic revolutionary poets are inspiring the countrywide protests in India against controversial citizenship law. Now, the protesters are singing poems of Faiz Ahmed Faiz, Habib Jalib and Muhammad Iqbal to demonstrate against Indian government's move. Students of Indian Institute of Technology's Kanpur campus sang Faiz's famous "We Will Be Witness" during a protest. In an interview, a student of Delhi's Jawaharlal Nehru University sang Habib Jalib's iconic poem, "Such a Dark Dawn, I Do Not Know, I Will Not Own." Meanwhile, a protester played Allama Iqbal's famous poem, "Our Homeland is Hindustan," during a protest in New Delhi. The Hindutva nationalists have not liked the use of these poems and have filed complaints and cases against the protesters. In another development, 3,000 Dalits from Indian state Tamil Nadu have decided to convert to Islam over continued caste discrimination and torture. Dalits are considered the lowest caste and untouchables in Hinduism and have been facing abuse for centuries. General Secretary of Dalit Rights Outfit, Tamil Puligal Kachi, has said that they have had enough and will convert next month. He said his community will no longer live under suppression of racial abuse. All converting Dalits belong to 5 districts: Erode, Coimbatore, Tirupur, Namakkal and Salem of Tamil Nadu. In Hawaii, the remains of 6 people have been found after a helicopter crashed on the island of Kauai. The aircraft carrying 7 passengers went missing in a remote area of rugged terrain at the end of an air tour. Rescue officials said there is no sign of survivors as search for the final passenger will resume today. The Coast Guard said steep terrain, low visibility, choppy seas and rain hampered the search for the wreckage. They said victims' identities have not yet been released, pending notification of next of kin. Hawaii's fourth largest island, Kauai, is mountainous with jagged cliffs and tropical rainforests. Moving on to Iraq, where one U.S. civilian contractor has been killed in a rocket attack on a military base in Kirkuk. In a statement, the U.S.-led coalition says the attack on the K-1 base wounded several American service members and Iraqi personnel. It said Iraqi security forces are leading the response and investigation. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. U.S. interests in Iraq have been hit by a flurry of rocket attacks since late October, prompting Washington to call on Baghdad to protect them. Washington has blamed Iran-backed paramilitary groups for these attacks. Meanwhile, protesters have supported President Barham Saleh's rejection of Iran-backed Assad al-Idani's nomination for Prime Minister of Iraq. Demonstrators called for an independent candidate to be nominated as the country's new prime minister. Earlier, President Saleh said he would rather resign than accept a candidate already rejected by the protest movement. Meanwhile, Iran-supported groups slammed Iraq's president, saying his decision was made at the behest of the U.S. The group said the president had violated the constitution by refusing to carry out his duties. Around 460 people have been killed and 25,000 injured since anti-government demonstrations broke out in October this year. In Syria, nearly 250,000 people have fled Idlib over the last 2 days amid bombardment by government and Russian warplanes. The United Nations says the mass displacement has left the Marat al-Noman region almost empty. On Thursday, U.S. President Donald Trump urged Tehran, Damascus and Moscow to stop killing people in Idlib. He said Turkey is working hard to stop the carnage in the region. Idlib is the last major stronghold of rebels fighting government forces since 2015. The UN General Assembly has approved a resolution condemning human rights abuses against Myanmar's Rohingya Muslims and other minorities. The world body voted 134 to 9 with 28 abstentions in favor of the resolution. The bloc called on Myanmar's government to take measures to combat incitement of hatred against the Rohingya, Rakhine, Kachin and Shan states. The UN condemned abuses against the minorities, including arbitrary arrests, torture, rape and deaths in detention. The body has adopted an over $3 billion budget that for the first time includes funding for the investigation of war crimes in Syria and Myanmar. The Rohingya crisis exploded in 2017 when Myanmar's military launched a campaign against minorities in Rakhine. Malaysia says it will neither refuse asylum to Uyghur Muslims nor will extradite them. Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad said they should be granted the right to seek asylum in another country. The Malaysian Prime Minister was of the opinion that Uyghurs are not fairly protected. Earlier, China had slammed the U.S. House of Representatives for passing a bill requiring the Trump administration to toughen its response to Xinjiang. China's foreign ministry said the bill wantonly smears Beijing's efforts to eliminate and combat extremism. In France, trade union leaders vowed to continue their strike that has crippled transport services in Paris for the past 3 weeks. The strike against President Emmanuel Macron's pension reforms has entered its 24th day. Union leaders have accused Prime Minister Edouard Philippe of not being true to his word, who has said he wants no confrontation with protesters. The longest transport strike in France lasted for 28 days, also over Christmas back in 1986 and early 1987. Macron's proposed policy has angered workers because it would raise the retirement age and reduce post-retirement benefits. Russia, China and Iran have kicked off their first joint naval drill in the northern part of the Indian Ocean. The 4-day exercise comes at a time of heightened tensions between Iran and U.S. since Washington withdrew from 2015 nuclear deal last year. Iranian Navy said the message of this exercise is peace and security through cooperation and unity. Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said Iran has long stated its readiness to work with its neighbors to secure the Persian Gulf. Earlier, Chinese Foreign Ministry said drills will deepen exchange and cooperation between the navies of the three countries. Russia says its new hypersonic weapon of intercontinental range has become operational following years of tests. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu informed President Vladimir Putin over the inclusion of the first missile unit, equipped with the Avangard hypersonic glide. The military claimed the Avangard is capable of flying 27 times faster than the speed of sound. Earlier, President Putin said the Avangard can penetrate current and future missile defense systems. He said not a single country possesses the hypersonic weapons, leave alone continental range of hypersonic weapons. And we're going to be taking a quick short break. Coming up next, in the Bulletin, we'll be learning more about as authorities scramble to protect water plants. And also, migrant shelters are shuttered in northern Mexico. Welcome back. Now, the United Nations says 3 staff members of the UNHCR were abducted in Democratic Republic of Congo's eastern province of South Kivu. UN's mission in DR Congo said the suspected Mai Mai militiamen attacked a refugee camp in the town of Baraka. It said militias captured a Senegalese office assistant and 2 Congolese security officers. The government forces and police have started an investigation. The UN stabilization mission in the country has now advised its staff in the province to suspend operations and return to bases. In Australia, uncontrolled bushfires are still burning after ripping through the state's prominent vine region and around the country's largest city, Sydney. Hazardous smoke blanketed Sydney, heightened public anger and raised political pressure on the government to do more to curb climate change. This report has details.
Australian wildfires are threatening Sydney's water supplies ahead of a heat wave as the authorities scramble to protect water plants. The authorities are focusing to protect pumping stations, pipes, and other infrastructures from intense bushfires surrounding Sydney. Temperatures rose above 40 degrees Celsius in parts of South Australia, marking the start of a new wave of heat in the continent's south. The state's ambulance service said they have attended to hundreds of patients with heat-related conditions since December.
We're very focused on trying to bring that fire under control, prioritising the threat to life and property, but we're also very mindful about the implications of fire burning in the catchment area, what that means when it does rain again, what sort of runoff will there be, what sort of siltation will there be, ash, soil, all that sort of stuff getting into the waterways.
Temperatures in New South Wales state are forecast to head back towards 40 degrees Celsius next week, fueling fires near Warragamba Dam. The dam is at lesser than half the capacity amid prolonged droughts. It provides water to about 80% of Sydney's 5 million residents.
We are seeing the temperatures starting to rise over the coming days. We're seeing this heat wave starting to move across New South Wales again. That's going to bring not just the heat out of the centre of Australia, we're going to see the temperatures up into the low to mid-40s across a lot of areas.
The bushfires have destroyed over 4 million hectares across the country, dwarfing the terrain burned by fierce fires in California during 2019.
In Mexico, a shelter home for Central American migrants in the northern city of Ciudad Juarez has been temporarily closed due to an outbreak of chickenpox infection. Mexican authorities say 72 people, including 69 children, have been diagnosed with the virus. More about the viral infection in this report.
The chickenpox outbreak is the biggest epidemic eruption in Ciudad Juarez since the introduction of Trump's migrant protection protocols, also known as Remain in Mexico policy. Around 800 people in the facility awaiting their U.S. court hearings are at the risk of getting infected. Most of those infected feel unwell with symptoms like blister-like rashes, fevers, and fatigue, but some people have developed serious complications.
We can't isolate them completely because they are families. So there are children who are 2, 3, or 4 years of age who have chickenpox. So we have an area especially assigned to children who already have chickenpox and they are receiving proper medical attention with all necessary care.
A federal official, Juan Carlos, said the virus was spread by a Honduran girl returned to Mexico by the U.S. government.
We have suspended the entry of new migrants who are returned by the United States due to the chickenpox outbreak we have at the shelter. Once controlled, more will be able to enter.
The shelter, which is run by Mexico's federal government, has not commented on the situation yet.
In Germany, the Baltic island of Reims has become a research home for deadly animal diseases. The Friedrich Loeffler Institute tests the world's most dangerous viruses on animals to develop vaccines that could save lives. More about the research center in this report.
The research institute, Reims Island, is the oldest center for the study of viruses in the world. Dozens of animals are deliberately infected here with viruses as part of the research to monitor the effects of diseases. There are 89 laboratories and 163 stables.
So we really are the Alcatraz for viruses, a kind of prison for viruses. We do everything possible to ensure they do not spread.
There are between 80 and 100 large animals on the island, including alpacas, boars, cows, goats, and sheep. The researchers said when the animals get too sick, they are put down so as not to let them suffer.
Our biggest task is working out preparations for an outbreak. We try to investigate everything that is possible without animal testing. Nothing goes into the animal that I could answer in cell culture.
The government has invested some $334 million in the institute since 2008. There is no installation like it in Europe, although there are similar facilities in Australia and Canada.
And now some updates from the world of business. Russia's Gazprom says it has paid $2.9 billion to Ukraine's Naftogaz to settle a long-running dispute over transit fees for gas. Gazprom spokeswoman said the payment has been done in accordance with the decision of the Stockholm Arbitration Court. Last year's ruling by the court was a major stumbling block to agreeing to a new gas transit deal between Moscow and Kiev. The Russian gas giant previously rejected the claim, but President Vladimir Putin said Russia wanted to find a solution. Last week, Moscow and Kiev signed a preliminary deal on the transit of Russian gas to Europe via Ukraine after months of difficult talks. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has unveiled the country's first homebred automobile prototype. Speaking at the launch ceremony, President Erdogan said the move will realize the country's long-term dream. More about the car in this report.
The new car TOG will be available in the market in 2022. The electric car will have 5 models with 170,000 units produced in a year. The project is expected to cost over $3.5 billion in over 13 years. Erdogan said Turkey wants it to become a global brand.
We are preparing our country for the future with this car project, together with its design, battery and charging stations. There are very few countries which are capable of doing this in the world. By entering the field of electric cars from the very beginning, Turkey is moving ahead of everyone.
Turkey is already a big exporter of cars made domestically by Ford, Fiat Chrysler, Renault, Toyota and Hyundai.
let's take a look at how the weather is in your city. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. For now, that's all. We'll see you again at the top of the hour.